A haiku by 19th century Japanese artist Hokusai goes, I write, erase, rewrite, erase again, and then a poppy blooms. And I really like this haiku because I think it captures that iterative process of speech composition that we've been talking about and trying to practice here in this class. I also start with a haiku because if you are like I was in my first few years of college, you might be longing for a bit more freedom and creativity in your assignments. And you might be thinking to yourself, man, he asks for too many constraints, or he's constraining my creativity too much with his assignments. That's fair. But I would remind you that the haiku is maybe one of the most constrained forms of writing that we have. 3 lines, 5 syllables for each of the lines. But within those constraints, creativity has really bloomed for centuries. People keep using it and keep writing more and more interesting and creative haikus. So maybe we could use our kind of Asia-centric perspective to remind ourselves that creativity and constraint aren't binary opposites. Rather, they are unified oppositions like the yin and yang. And that in our practice, we can try to strike a harmony between constraints and creativity. And we could remind ourselves that when we care for the constraints and have good constraints, creativity can actually excel. So I hope you can conceive of the kinds of organizational strategies and what we're going to be talking about here, outlining as not so much constraining you, but allowing you to create harmony with your creativity. So, what I'd like to do in this video then is talk a little bit about the principles of outlining, how you can use them to draft your speeches, and then I want to show you how I'm going to evaluate your outlines for speeches 2 and 3. So let's begin by first making a distinction between some different kinds of outlines that you should be concerned with. There's what I call the full sentence, full content outline. That's what I'm grading. So that's a big concern to you. I'm going to grade the final draft, but you should be, creating drafts of this along the way. This is what the textbook calls a preparation outline because they mean you're using it to prepare your speech. I call it a full sentence, full content outline because I want you to write it in full sentences, and it represents the main content that you intend to present during your speech. Keep in mind, I don't use that outline to make sure that you are fully memorized. I'm not concerned that you're reproducing this outline word for word. That is not at all my expectation. Remember, I'm expecting you to do extemporaneous speaking. So what I'm going to do is use the outline to help me grade you more accurately, to help me listen to your speech, but also if, let's say, you drop something from your outline, let's say you forget your preview statement, I'm going to look at your outline and see if you had intended to give a preview statement, if you wrote a preview statement in the outline. And if you did, I'm going to give you partial credit even though you might have forgotten to deliver it or got nervous during your speech and didn't deliver it. Then you'll get partial credit. So preparing your outline is not only necessary for you to have a good speech at the end, you'll turn it in early so that you have time to rehearse from that outline. It will also allow me to give you a more accurate grade. Okay, as you are using this full sentence, full content outline to draft your speech, what you're going to be doing is focusing and developing your ideas. That's the main goal here. You want to Stay focused on one idea at a time. So you have an order of ideas. You don't jump back and forth. And you stay focused on one idea at a time. And then you develop those ideas. You take those ideas from kind of broad ideas to very specific, concrete data to support those broad ideas. So you're going to focus and develop your ideas with outlining. To do that, you'll need to use the principles of coordination and subordination of your points. And I'm going to go into that more in just a second. But before I do, the second type of outline that you should be concerned with is what the textbook calls a speaking outline. And that's what you're going to hold in your hands. One hand, right? One hand. And you're going to use that speaking outline on note cards to help you deliver the speech. And of course, the speaking outline should be based on the preparation outline. It should be an abstract of it, an abbreviated version of it, a shrunken down version of that. But it should have the same order and the same organization, as the same shape as the full sentence outline. But it should be very brief, yeah? It should just be phrases, keywords, and only full sentences when absolutely necessary, let's say a quotation. And what they're trying to do then is trigger your memory. You don't want the note cards to carry the speech. You don't even want to be able to read off of the note cards. You simply want it to trigger the memory and allow you to speak in that extemporaneous style. For your speaking outline on note cards, I've actually provided you with a note card template. Let me try to find that here, which is right here. And this is available in the modules. And if you take a look, it describes how to design the cards. So this matches the rubric for speeches 2 and 3, where you can also find how I'm going to grade your note cards this time. But it also demonstrates what they could look like. Okay, so take a look at that. I'll show you later on in this lecture where you can find this. You can create your own that looks like this. You can use this one, replace your information with that information, replace that information with this information, and you can print it up and then cut it out and stick it onto a 3 by 5 inch note card. This is sized to be 3 by 5 inches. Or you could handwrite it, but it shouldn't be much more cluttered than what you see here, very abbreviated. Okay, so those are the two types of outlines that you'll have. The full sentence, full content outline you'll turn in early, and the speaking outline you'll have in your hands. Do not read your speech off of the full sentence, full content outline. You'll get a very bad grade if you do. Okay, let's talk more about these principles of subordination and coordination. And to do so, I'm going to pull up an example here, which is somewhere, maybe. Uh-oh, did I get rid of it? Let me see. Oh, here it is. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so this is outlining a very simple form of it, and I'm trying to highlight here for you the idea of subordination and coordination. Okay. When we're outlining, we're concerned with how our ideas are either coordinated with other ideas or subordinate to other ideas. So here we have 2 planets, right, at Roman numerals 1 and 2. These would be like the main points of your speeches. They are both coordinated with one another. And we know that because they're at the same level, they're indented at the same level, and they have the same symbol, Roman numerals here. So I know just by looking at it that these ideas are coordinated. They're also coordinated, I know, because they're both planets, right? So they're of the same type, kind, scope, or strength. So those are what we would call coordinated ideas and coordination. At each level, then, ideas that share the same level and share the same symbol are coordinated ideas. So The 1, the 2 here are coordinated. The 1, the 2 here are coordinated. We're going to fill these in just a second. As we move down and in, our ideas are getting subordinate to one another. They are digging deeper into that idea. They're getting more specific. They're offering support for that idea. Okay, so let's fill this in and see if we can figure out how subordination and coordination work. Let's say we have here Earth. We have North America here. North America is a continent. So from here I can reason that at A and C, those should be coordinated with North America. So those should also be continents. Here I see France. I know that France is in the continent of Europe. So I can assume that Europe is going to go here. I could color coordinate this in red. You don't need to color coordinate yours. I'm just doing it here for the visual. So down here, we would put, if we wanted to keep going on this, we would put another continent, maybe Asia here. Okay. Where would we put Germany here? Germany is a country in Europe, so it would go at the same level. It would be coordinated with France here. What about Mexico? Mexico, is it in Asia? Is it in Europe? No, it's in North America. You'd have to know that, of course. And then if we wanted to get an idea subordinate to the U.S., we might go to states. Maybe we go with Nevada here. So hopefully this is illustrating for you how we organize our ideas from broad ideas to specific ideas before changing to the next main idea. Okay, so we're going to use outlining to develop and support our ideas. Here's an example of it using full sentences. Here's the thesis statement for this speech. There have been many attempts to save the Huntridge Theater, but none have succeeded. The thesis statement is the broadest main idea. Each of the main points should be subordinate to the thesis statement. So there have been many attempts. The first attempt was, the second attempt was. Notice that those main points are coordinated with one another. Okay. As we go into the main point, we indent, we move over, we're getting subordinate ideas. The first attempt was to make it into a performing arts museum. There was really two things that happened. They presented their plan to display local artists and entertainers, and then this plan failed. So these ideas are coordinated with one another. And then these ideas are subordinate. Okay. I'm not going to read these to you. I'm going to show you the sample student outline, which also does this. The one last thing I want to point out about principles of outlining are that if you have 1 point, you really need to have 2 points. So notice that each of these are supported at least with 2 points below it. At some point, you got to stop. But if the point isn't worthy of support with at least 2 other points, is it even worthy of being in your outline? Okay, let's move on to talking a bit about how I'm going to grade these speeches. So to do that, I want to point to the rubric. The rubric for both speeches 2 and 3 explains what I'm looking for in the outlines right here, and it's worth 50 points, so it's pretty important to pay attention to this stuff. I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to show you the sample student outline, which is a great example of how to do this. I'm looking for your use of different sections, so I'm going to ask you to break your outline up into 3 sections: an introduction outline, a body outline, and a conclusion outline. And I want you to outline each of those sections using full sentences. I'm going to check to see that you're using subordination to support your ideas down to a certain level. And I'll talk more about that in a second. I want you to label things in your outline. I'll show you that in a second. I want you to use good grammar in your full sentence outlines. Write those in complete, grammatically correct sentences. You need to use in-text citations to keep track of your research in your outlines. And you need to have a works cited page. If you go to the modules, in outlining here, this is the video you're watching. This is going to explain how to do those written citations. And in here is a more detailed explanation of the rubric that I just showed you. But I want to talk through each of these things using the sample student outline. So here's where you can though read about this in more detail, so please do. But I'm going to use the rubric along with the sample student outline, and I'm just going to talk to you about how I would evaluate the sample student outline. First thing I want to say is that the sample student outline is not perfect, right? And it's really just to give you a sense of the format of these outlines. The sample student outline, by the way, you can find in the modules. Let me back up. Under the rubric and prompt for speech 2, so it's right, come on, right here. This is the sample informative full content outline under the speech 2 assignment instructions. All right, so it's over here, and here's the rubric that I'm going to use to evaluate it. So the first thing I'm checking to see is, does the outline have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion that are labeled introduction, body, conclusion? Look, introduction, look, body, look, conclusion down here. Notice that each of these sections starts with a Roman numeral 1. Essentially, you can think of each of these sections of the outline as being an independent outline. It's like 3 different outlines that start with Roman numeral 1 and then start over, labeled introduction, body, and conclusion. So I want those, and then each of those sections is outlined with 1 full sentence per symbol. So here we have 1 full sentence per symbol, 1 full sentence per symbol, 1 full sentence per symbol. So not multiple sentences on each of the symbols, 1 sentence per symbol. Okay. For subordination, I'm looking that you're actually using subordination, that you are indenting and you are organizing your ideas over, and you're using the symbols and indentation to indicate that subordination. And I'm going to check to see, this is totally arbitrary, that you hit at least 4 levels of subordination in your speeches. What does that mean? Well, here's 1 level of subordination, right? Roman numeral. Cancel. Here's another 2. Here's a 3rd level. And then down here, we have our 4th level. So this sample student outline goes down to the 4th level here and here, right here. And that's it. So they do it a few times. They get to the 4th level of subordination. So they're going to get the full points. This is to encourage you to develop your ideas with some specificity. So it's an arbitrary requirement, but I'm going to be checking to see that you get to at least 4 levels of subordination at least once. Labeling. I want you to clearly label for me. This is just for me so that I can see that what you say is the thesis is what I think is the thesis. I want you to label all parts of the introduction, conclusion, all transitions, and all the symbols are consistent. So here we go. Let's take a look up here. Introductions clearly labeled. All 5 parts of the introduction, the attention getter, the thesis statement, the audience orientation, the ethos, and the preview statement are labeled. The transition's labeled. The body is labeled. It starts back over at Roman numeral 1 for main point number 1. The transition between main point number 1 is labeled. Here's main point number 2. The transition between 2 and 3. The transition out. And then the conclusion is labeled. And all 3 parts of the conclusion, signal the end, review main points, and memorable end, are all labeled. This student uses good punctuation throughout. It's not noticeable. You know, there's a few errors perhaps in here, but I could read it without struggle. This student is going to use in-text citations. In-text citations you can read about more in the modules. They appear here. The author's last name, Feldberg. Author's last name, Dreyer. There would be a page number if there was a page number. You can read more about that. Feldberg and Smith is the third author. And then on the works cited page, Dreyer, Feldberg, Smith. Those match up. We're using MLA, Modern Language Association Style Guide, for the written citations as well as for the works cited page. There are resources for those in the modules down here. Formatting written citations for our outlines will help you with that. Okay, so that was what I wanted to cover here. It's a lot of information at one time. If you have questions, take it to the Common Course questions board. Remember, there's lots of videos on outlining that you can watch on YouTube. Try not to think of this as something that is constraining you so much as something that's enabling you, enabling some clarity and some structure and some shape within your brilliant creativity. Thank you.